Here we go. We have talked. I know who you are, what your role is. And I'll tell you a little bit about me. Our organization is called Demonstrated Success, and we are one of the vendors that's been approved to provide professional development to the charter schools through that grant. Our organization's been around since about 2017, and we are located in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, but we work all over New Hampshire, and now we also do a lot of work in Vermont, which has been really fun. Um, we do a lot of different things. Our beginnings focused on data and effective data use. I think it was like 2 rounds of school improvement ago, we were the technical assistance providers for the state of New Hampshire for the schools that are identified in need of improvement. We've worked with 21C programs. We do a lot of work in literacy and math and assessment and curriculum development and culture and climate and MTSS and leadership. And we just do a lot of stuff, and we have a wonderful staff of people, of trainers that all have specialties, and we all chip in to help schools. So today we are going to think about how we identify our school's highest priorities for improvement. And I had done part of this session at the charter school conference, but I've changed it up a little bit just for the timing and in case people had gone to that already to give some new resources and things. So the first thing we're going to talk about is leadership teams and that sort of structure for change and what that means. So let's you and I'm going to go through a couple of those slides, Susan. Is that okay? And then we'll talk about it.
Sure.
All right. So does your school have a representative leadership team?
We do not.
So one thing that we recommend is to put some stakeholders together, and so that everything doesn't fall on the director, right, or the AP, or for you as the business person, and you really get a group of people together that are representative leaders and can make decisions with confidence. Oftentimes, representation includes building administration, a small group of teachers, a student, if that's appropriate. And I think for you at the high school level, that would be appropriate, or a couple of students, a social emotional expert, a nurse, a parent possibly. Oh, there's Heather. And a board member. And I think that's even more important for charter schools. So, hey, Heather. You don't have to mute. We're just kind of having dialogue. We're all interactive. So hi. Um, okay, so that's it. And I mean, our organization thinks it's really important to have that representational team. And the way that we define that team is that they design and implement and maintain all the practices, all the structures that support the happenings at the school, right? So and I'm sure that your schools were at one point, if not a current mission and vision, right? Initially, you articulated a mission and a vision and guiding principles and core values, right? And a strategic plan. Sometimes that falls by the wayside. It would be the instructional leadership team or the leadership team that together works to revise, re-energize, restate that mission, the vision, your core ideas, and the systems that support those things in the working of the school. And then your leadership team can also advise the school on issues of safety, budget, and personnel. And they can, that representational leadership team also may be a team of people that hears from the field in the school or the others in the school and brings issues to light. And we'll talk about all of this in a sec. And something that's important to think about is how decisions are made. There's advisory decisions and there's consensus decisions. And what we have found is that oftentimes decisions that I'm just going to go to the next slide. Decisions that involve safety, budget, personnel, and facilities oftentimes your leadership team serves in an advisory role because ultimately it'll be the director and possibly the board that makes some of those decisions. And there should always be someone from your leadership team that attends board meetings, right? And with regard to curriculum and instruction and scheduling and professional development, those sorts of topics, we generally advise that those decisions are made through consensus. And I'm going to talk a little bit. So advisory is basically your leader sets out from the beginning the expectation that I'm going to take input from this leadership team, but ultimately the decision is going to be made with the board and myself. Whereas for consensus, it's literally you bring your team to consensus around a decision that has to be made. So it's not majority. It's the idea that everybody can live with the decision that's made, right? Everyone can champion it. Even if they don't entirely agree with it, you have to bring your team to the point where they can champion it to the rest of the school. And so there's a lot of different protocols for consensus that you can use. I use a fist of five. So, you're talking about, you're coming to a decision making. Someone may put out there a recommendation, then you put it out to the team for consensus, and people will, hold up like 5, I'm 100% behind it. 3, I can live with it. 1 might mean I'm not ready yet. We need to continue talking about this. And then the group would debate and try to bring the whole group around so that they can be a 3 or above. So that's what we're sort of talking about with the consensus, but you can use your own consensus protocol. So now I'd love to have a conversation. And if Heather, you can unmute, that would be fabulous, because this truly is an interactive session. Part of the value I was hoping is that, different folks from charter schools could come together and talk about this work. So I guess I'll just start. I'm going to throw it out there. Susan and Heather, if you're able, if you're not, that's okay. And your colleagues, let's talk a little bit about, what happens now with regard to a leadership team at your schools. And how do you engage in school improvement planning so far? Do you want to start, Susan, or?
So our director and our co-director, and myself, we all do attend the board meetings and we have conversations with the board monthly.
Mm. And does the board manage instructional decisions in the building? They probably don't, right? The curriculum, instruction.
No, the co-director and director would speak with the staff when they're talking about curriculum and making those decisions. And then anything that we felt needed to be brought to the board's attention. Like if we need to, we just recently added a halftime math science teacher. That's something that we would have brought to the board to discuss why we wanted to increase our curriculum and have more offerings for the students.
And when you're doing planning around new approaches or professional development that's needed or a piece of curriculum that you want to adopt or pilot, how does the process happen? How are those decisions made?
So again, the co-director and director would speak with the staff to get a feeling of what everybody is a consensus felt was needed.
Yep.
And then we would bring it forward to the board if we needed financial backing and that type of stuff.
Got it. Okay. And your mission and your vision, is that re-energized and rewritten on a regular basis?
So we actually just did a review again because of our renewal, our 10-year renewal. So we looked over all of that documentation again and updated and tweaked.
And is there a representative group of, you do that with the whole staff?
So that was done with myself, the director, and the co-director, as well as some of the board members.
Thanks. Heather, what about you? Hi, Heather. And
hello.
How you doing?
Oh, it's been a long day.
Oh, sorry.
So
yeah,
we're brand new.
Mm.
We don't run like a traditional school. We use Admentum, which is an online virtual platform. They are our certified teachers. We have, at this point, there's only 3 of us. There's myself, a teacher, and a para.
Mhm.
We only have 15 students. We just actually got into our permanent space. Um, we're figuring it out.
Yeah. And so when you say you've gotten into your permanent space, where is that?
We're in Claremont, in Lower Main Street.
Okay.
We've been doing pretty much an online schooling up until now with like almost like a drop-in if students needed the extra help.
Mhm.
Because we were waiting for a space to be available because we have been waiting on contractors
Mm.
since September. Well,
Mhm.
long before September actually, but we were planning on being in here the second week of September. We
Mhm.
got in January 2nd.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. And so you basically have a mini leadership team of 3.
Yes. We do have a director, but she's the director of the whole building. And so now that we're in our space and that headache of dealing with the contractors is gone, she's trying to catch up on a lot of other projects.
Okay. Got it. Got it. Got it. All right. Well, it sounds like for you, Heather, it's in the works. And
Yeah,
for you, Susan, it sounds like you have a system. And I'm assuming that you feel pretty good about it, your system, Susan.
I am listening for,
I do, and I think it'll improve as we get more board training.
Mm.
I think it may shift and change a little bit,
Yeah.
which will just make things even better.
Great. And Heather, you got cut off. You're listening to learn, yes?
no, exactly. I'm listening to learn. I don't see my 2 staff here, which one, something ended up coming up, so she couldn't, but the para was gonna hop on from home, but that's all right.
It's all right. It's recorded. We're good.
Yep.
Um, I wanted to emphasize here when you're thinking about your leadership team and expanding it, or, one thing that our organization is very adamant about is efficient systems for teaming and the way teams manage their logistics, their communication, their consistency, their goal setting, their paperwork, their note taking. We have found over many years that oftentimes teams sit down and they have conversations, and people are busy and things aren't written down, or everyone's in a rush, and that really good thinking and planning isn't documented well enough, and then it can't be implemented, or people spend a lot of time rehashing conversations. So these are just some things for, teams to consider, and it sounds to me like for both of you, I'm not sure, it doesn't sound like your team as it stands now, Susan, and for you too, Heather, you're focusing on everything.
Yeah. I actually have a meeting with Karen next week.
With me. Yes,
Yeah,
that's me.
yeah.
Oh my goodness, look at me.
Yes,
I
we
didn't
have-
even put my name in.
Well, and I don't see your, I was gonna say, so you're Karen?
I am Karen. You have a
So we're
meeting with
meeting next week.
Yes. So I responded to you today. So
Yes.
I'm so sorry I didn't put my name, yeah, to both of you. I'm sorry. So so these are just some questions. What frequency, how long will we meet? Where will we house things? How will we make that consistent? What are our processes for agendas, community agreements? What does a great meeting look like for us? All those things. Something that I wanted to share with you that I talked about at the charter school conference is, when you're trying to do complete school change, right? You want to think about it in terms of a theory of action. So it sort of follows these steps, and you're always going to work to identify needs. And I think, Heather, I didn't send you, I have a document I'll share with you in a little bit on these slides, but Susan, I think I sent it to you, sort of a needs assessment. Did you get it, Susan?
I can check my email.
It's okay. I mean, we'll get to it in a little bit, but I'll show it to you. So we're going to talk in a little bit about all the different ways to identify your priorities and your needs. once you do that, and this is, in terms of defining a theory of action, you're identifying your needs and your highest priority needs. And then your next step, and it's a little like backward planning when you're planning a unit. So, because your next step is really your outcomes, right? So, what does success look like? So, in this example, our need in theory is, better support for learners with diverse needs. Because maybe some data and some surveys indicated that our learners with the diverse needs were not excelling. They maybe didn't have a good sense of belonging, whatever it is. We'll talk about the needs assessment. But what it'll look like is that if we are successful, right, all learners will receive the instruction that they need that's tailored to their needs. And then the next step is, so you have your need, you have your outcome, and then you're going to articulate the actions that you hope to institute to lead you to that outcome or that success. So in this situation, this is just a model. Teachers are going to do peer observations for differentiation. Me as the school director, I am going to hire and schedule or do it in-house professional development on how to differentiate to meet those diverse needs. We are going to have teachers goal setting, and we are also going to solicit student feedback on how those needs are being met. Those are my actions. And then my expected outcome is that teachers will differentiate their classroom instruction to meet learners' needs, and that the long-term results will be that every student makes growth or achieves. So this visual can sort of keep you channeled and organized for your thinking about school improvement. Do you have questions or comments about that?
No.
Nope.
Okay. So I guess what I'm wondering for both of you, and Heather, I know that you're at the very beginning, so your questions, for info will be limited, but I'd love to hear, Susan, if you in the past have taken any action to define your school needs and what that's looked like.
So I've been involved with identifying needs for our title grants, which seems like it follows the same process that you had on that previous slide, where we have a priority, we have an activity, and then the performance and the outcome. So we usually will reach out to the teachers to get their input on what they feel the students are needing or what they themselves are needing. And then we move from there.
Okay. Just a piece of information for you. Last year, we designed a title toolkit to help with the process of more effectively writing title funding requests. And if you think you would, that might be nice for you to access, I can send it to you. Okay, just let me know. It was basically, we did a series of webinars and documentation on how to articulate your title requests and what information to include. And so anyway, let me know if you feel like you would want to access that.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit now about different data sources for understanding and prioritizing school needs. And there's resources in here that I've attached. But I'm going to talk in the big picture first. This is a super busy slide, but I had I just loved all the images I found, so I went for it. I'll talk about the images a little bit. But first, let's talk about achievement data. So when you're looking to define what your school needs, you probably should be looking at achievement data and trend data. So oftentimes we have folks looking at their 3 or 4 years of state assessment data. For you at the high school, it might be 3 or 4 years of SAT outcomes, 3 or 4 years of AIMSweb, not at high school, but Heather, I don't know. Heather, are you at high school too?
Yes, we're 9 through 12.
Okay. So for both of you, it would be, SAT data. It might be if you have NWEA or STAR or performance assessments, just trend data over time so that you can look and see the patterns of weakness for students in your classes. Now, on top of that, of course, you're going to want to look at who's sitting in front of you. So who are your students What are their lived experiences, their backgrounds, their school experiences? You're going to look at SES, socioeconomic of in your environment. You're going to look at language needs. So, learning needs, IEPs. You're also going to want to collect information about their social emotional health and behavior data, right? Because sometimes needs that you might have may fall under the area of, kids aren't learning, potentially may not be learning in our environment because maybe our behaviors are really challenging and it's interrupting learning. Or maybe students are not feeling an affinity or safe in their school, or in a particular classroom. You're going to want to know that and understand if it's a priority to address that directly. I'm going to keep going. Self-reflection tools, I'm going to show you in the bottom left corner is the reflection tool that I sent out to most of the folks that signed up for today. And we'll talk through that in a little bit. But it's basically your leadership team would take themselves through this tool, and I'll take you through the tool in a second, to try to surface areas of weakness that you might want to grow. Then we have stakeholder perception surveys, which I also have a couple slides here where I can connect you with some ideas for that. But you want to find out, are our parents satisfied with the product that their kids are getting? Do they feel included in the school community? Are they participating to the extent that they want to participate and can participate? Are we leveraging them, to the maximum extent? And then that's your parents. For your students, stakeholder surveys might address perceptions of belonging, student opinion about the type of instruction that they're receiving, how they feel connected to the school, what after school activities they might like to see or expand into, scheduling, whether the schedule is working for them. So that's or teachers, like state teachers are another stakeholder you're going to want to survey and get information from. The next piece is focus groups, and that's sort of goes along with stakeholder perception surveys. And what we often do is we will create a survey, or maybe a school will use a pre-existing survey, and then to make sure that they get the nuance that goes along with the data, they may bring together a cross-section of the stakeholder group and have a series of questions. And there's a slide on that, and we'll talk about that. The next piece we often use for gathering information about school needs is walkthroughs. And we'll talk about that. There's a slide on that. And various walkthrough templates and forms that you can create based on what you want to see in the classroom, based on your mission, based on your vision and your core values. So if you're an arts school, there's things that you are going to want to see in the classroom. You're probably going to want to see evidence of student agency. You're going to want to see evidence of creative thinking. You're going to want to see evidence of project-based learning, right? Of performance assessment. So all of that, you kind of want to collect information to see if what's actually being executed in the classroom. Teachers may feel that they're executing, but you also want to make sure that you objectively get that information through observation. The next is building climate walkthroughs, where you can create checklists for what you want to see in terms of your building environment. Are student work on the walls? Are labels clear? Are entry, exit, clutter, maintenance? All these things add to the quality and accessibility of education and teaching and learning for kids and teachers. And then a couple of different, the last three: community walks, shadowing students, and empathy interviews. So in the upper left corner of this slide, there's a book called Street Data. And those sort of more subjective and perception-oriented and empathy-oriented methods of collecting data and information are all written about beautifully in this book called Street Data. Community walks involves basically get out to the community and see what the community is like, assess the community, connect with community organizations, have your kids take you out into their community, right? How can you leverage the community? Shadowing student through the course of their day. So, what does school look like for the student who's high achieving? What does school look like for the student who may have a math disability, or for whom reading and writing is a struggle, or executive functioning? And sort of you can gather information. It's a slice of a student's day. And last is an empathy interview with families, and it's more collecting information one-on-one and asking questions about their experience in the school. Do you have questions about that yet?
No.
No.
There's lots of different and wonderful ways. Let me, whoops. I'm going to go back one. So I wanted to just have you understand the types of questions that you might ask in a climate survey. And these are live links where it says culture, and I'll take you there in a second. Culture and climate survey for DS, which is something that we created last year. And it's actually a high school survey. So you're free to use it and download it and change it, and some other resources. But this is what I wanted to sort of show you. This data over here there's an organization called Panorama. I'm going to be perfectly frank with you. I think for small charter schools, I think it's too expensive, and I don't think you get enough bang for your buck. I think you're better off creating your own climate surveys based on, there's endless, and I'll show you, there's endless resources for creating this. So, but these are the types of questions, right? How positive or negative the energy of this school, pleasant or unpleasant. These are some of the questions from the Panorama survey around school climate. And, you might, out of 748 students, 54% of students had a positive response to that question. And that's the way Panorama reports out. Over here on our right, this is that same data. And I just wanted to show you that you can slice and dice your data by different student groups, by grade levels. And so we have here, for this was a very large public school in Vermont. And so we were able to, get representational data, although the numbers themselves I took out, that and by grade levels and by gender. And you can get really valuable information about how kids are experiencing their school. And I'm just going to show you here. Are you seeing culture and climate questionnaire?
Yes.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's really interesting to create, and this is what this one does. You create parallel questions for students, teachers, and you can do it with parents as well, so that you can analyze your data and look at it for discrepancies. So like, for instance, a question might be, and I can go down, this is demographic data at the top, and then data about the school environment. And this is something that we developed for another school in Salem. And I should probably neutralize it, so I will do that. But there's no data in here. So about relationships, student and adult relationships, you can see here, and then student to student relationships. And it's interesting because, like, for instance, over here, this is about advisory, and we're going to find out how the students feel about their advisory teacher, right? And can I connect with that person? But at the same time, we're asking the teachers about their behavior towards students. And so we're looking at discrepancies as points of needed change. Questions around that?
I
Nope.
wouldn't even dare ask questions right now. We just had to revamp our whole behavior plan.
Heather, we're going to talk next week. It'd be great. And I just want to point out to you, if you decide to use it, I'm not going to open the other folder here, and I'm going to give you the link to these slides right in the chat. But just so you know, oh, here we go. This takes you to my personal collection of surveys that I have used over many years to create surveys for schools. All right. So I've pulled from different surveys that I have collected. All right. And if you decide to go with that route, we actually have a tool that we've created through Demonstrated Success that the Department of Education in New Hampshire is now using for their surveys across the whole state. And if you want, we're always happy to share that with you. All right. The next piece I want to show you is academic data. I know you guys you have SAT, and these are some universal assessments over here on the left that often schools use to analyze how their students are doing. And then these are more common assessments that also can be used to inform how students are doing. So you might have classroom formative assessment, you might have common end of unit assessments, or maybe you have 3 times a year, you're using a shared writing rubric with a on-demand prompt. And if you do that over a series of years, for your 9th grade, your 10th grade, you can see patterns of achievement of how the kids are doing. And that'll give you information about, oh, we need to adjust our instruction so that kids can do better on conventions and grammar or elaboration, or right. So you want to use that data. And I want you to know in here that this is a live link and that I've attached here. Vermont has done a series of studies. We've been doing some work in Vermont, and they have put together reviews of some national assessments that tell you information about what it's good for and how valid and reliable it is. So I just want you to know that that's there for you, and that's a live link in case you're looking to adopt a new assessment for data collection. What assessments do you use, Susan, currently?
So we look at the state assessments, our SAT data. We did try to purchase the NWEA software, but it is very pricey. And
Yes.
being a charter school, it's very difficult, to get the funding for that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that that's the biggest bang for your buck either, and we can talk about that.
Okay.
It's good to have a normed assessment. Like the state assessment will allow you to track yourself against the achievement of your students against similar students across the state or the country, and that is very important. But we should probably talk about some other options. Heather, you were saying that you use Edmentum.
Yes.
And that I wonder if that's a less expensive option than NWEA, and a lot of schools are using that.
So Edmentum does have an assessment piece that you can
Mhm.
purchase. We were able to purchase 10 like blocks.
Yeah.
And so the thought behind that was some of our lower level students, we could use it to make sure that we were meeting their needs. And so we have done one assessment for them because we got it a little later. And so the plan is to do another one towards the end of February. And see.
And you can compare the data for growth.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, Edmonton, this program is not ideal. And the plan is to look and see what else is out there this summer. But the assessment piece is pretty interesting.
So, Susan, you might want to price that and see if that's something that's a little more accessible.
I don't know if you can just buy the exact path piece, but I think it was for 10, I think it was like, I want to say like $350.
Oh, that's much more reasonable.
Yeah, it wasn't crazy because I was like, oh, well, that won't put us out. And I don't know how many students you have, but we'll max out at 40. We're very small.
I think Susan has close to 150.
Yeah.
Another thing for you, Susan, and your school and your students is because you're arts-based and performance-based and, a rigorous system for performance assessment. Have you dabbled in performance assessment?
I have not. That would be more the director and the co-director.
It would be really interesting to hear more about assessment and what your local assessments are, and if you would be able to, I'm more happy to help you, integrate your standards with a performance assessment system that would be able to give you some consistent feedback on your highest priority standards and on learning outcomes. And, anytime we're happy to talk about that.
Okay, great.
I wanted to show you, but earlier I was talking about observation tools and the need to get into your classrooms to actually see what's going on as opposed to perception, right? So each of these are different observation protocols. And so this first one is a social emotional health and learning protocol that basically I'll open it and I'll show you. It's a walkthrough. This is from CASEL. I don't know if both of you know what CASEL is, but it is your complete and utter go-to for all things social emotional learning. It is foundational for all social emotional work. And you can get so many great resources there. And they've generated this, and this is basically, you can see here, it takes you through a rubric of classroom practices. And there are indicators here on the left that all refer to indicators in the classroom that will reflect on social emotional health and learning. So that is one that I have uploaded here. There's a solution tree literacy look-fors. There's a DS literacy. We've developed these in our work with schools. We often will wind up contracting with the school and we'll find out from them what they want to see in the classroom. And we will help them to create a look-fors document. So all of these are just some different look-fors documents that you should feel free to access from this slide deck. Okay. And then I think this is one of the last about data, sort of alternative data collection, but this is just an example of some different student focus group questions that you might bring. You might bring a cross section of your 9th graders, a cross section of your 10th graders, 11th graders, 12th graders, or you could create your groups differently. You could create groups for kids that maybe have IEPs and bring them in and talk to them, or your kids that are your theater kids, any way you want to slice and dice it. But these are some questions that you might, could use in a focus group if you were going to do some student perception data gathering. Okay. So that was sort of a broad stroke of some of the different data that you will want to collect depending on the changes that you're thinking of at your school and what you might want to explore. And then I had shared with everybody, and I'm going to take this opportunity right now to give you the link to the slides so that you can look along with me. I'm just going to change permissions. And in my little Zoom here. Okay, I have just put the link to these slides in the chat.
Okay,
And this
great.
way you can open up this document on your own.
Now, I do have one question.
Yeah.
We struggle with our stakeholder team, trying to get people to participate. Do you have any suggestions for getting parents and students to be more receptive to surveys that we send out?
I'm trying to think about some strategies. So the students are a captive audience. You shouldn't have a problem. All you have to do is make that happen during the day. So when we've administered surveys to students in public school, like we did a huge survey initiative in Pinkerton Academy, which is, gargantuan. We actually scheduled students to take the survey in one of their in their English class because everybody took that, right? So I mean, if you have advisories or homerooms, I would have students take it then.
Okay.
And then for parents, what I've always done when I was working in schools and now what I advise is when you have parents in, so if you have nights or days or events, then you lure your parents in through food or blah, blah, blah. There's one way. Another thing is you leverage your students. So you have kids go home and approach their parents about taking the survey. And what we've done is you email the survey to the parent, and then you have the kids go home and talk to your kids every day for a week. You give them a week and you're like, go home, make sure your parents, and you could set up some competition, especially in the high school, because you might need that. I mean, kids are
Right.
probably barely talking to their parents. So you could set up some fun competition. You know, if whichever grade level gets the most parent replies, then they blank, 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 right?
Okay.
One thing I will caution you in New Hampshire is that when you survey students, there's a law that says you need parent permission if the survey is a non-academic survey. So there have been different schools that we've worked with that have handled it differently. We had worked with one district who decided that because this type of perception survey is certainly related to academic achievement, they simply decided that this was it. And they were administering it without, but unless you do that, you actually have to get permission from parents. You have to give them an opt-out option. And if you decide, depending on what you decide to do, get back in touch with me. And I have forms that we've created for other schools. And even in the tool that I'm describing that we have, those forms are in there already. The survey's in there. And if you wanted to go that route, be sure to get back in touch because I think that we can probably make your life easier.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So are you in this school needs document now?
Yes.
So let's open it. And oops, sorry. Why is that happening? Why is that? I want that to come alive. Oh, now it has come alive. So when it comes alive for you, you're going to make a copy. And what I'm going to suggest is that you do put together a leadership team, to the extent that you're able, and work through this school needs inventory. And you can see here that it's divided up into different categories. So there's 4 levels these are all indicators on the left under school culture. And together, what I would suggest, this is the way we've run it in the past, your options are the following. You can either have everybody, if you have 5 people in the room, you can have everybody finish a section independently and then on their own. So, hand it out to them. And then you can have consensus conversations. And I do think that that's where the value comes in. So you can come up with a consensus rating. So if the director, the assistant director, and you, Susan, all, let's say most staff embrace the philosophy that all students are the responsibility of all school adults. Let's say you think that's a 2, your director thinks that's a 4, and your assistant director thinks that's a 3. It's a great opportunity. That discrepancy is a great opportunity for conversation. And that's when the notes, the evidence, and the needs, you'll have some really good information there. And hopefully you can bring yourselves to better understanding just through the consensus conversation. So I think that this is a really good tool as a worksheet. So you can see here that you have these different indicators under culture, and then some indicators under leadership. And our first, piece is a representative instructional leadership team, purpose, roles, responsibilities, strategic plans, things like that. All right. And then we go back down. There's schedule, budget, staffing. So a series of indicators there. Data use indicators. And universal classroom practices. And this speaks to what I was speaking about earlier around what are your expectations that you want to see in your specific environment that's connected to your mission, your values. And you can change these variables, obviously. This is a doc. You can take this and you can change the variables. But these are some of the pieces that we have input there. So you rate those different, and this needs inventory may be cross-checked with your classroom observations, right? To see what kinds of changes might need to be happening. Any questions around that?
No.
Nope.
It's just a tool for you for self-reflection. And so in terms of a system for change, this next tool helps you to reflect back on the priorities that, and so you've done sort of your needs assessment or your walkthrough, sorry, with that previous document. And the purpose of this document is to really start to think about, okay, so we have now, let's say you're undergoing your needs assessment and you have looked at some academic data and trends, and you have, completed a climate survey, and you have filled out and you've worked through that template that we looked at the prior slide with a team. You're going to begin to think about what are our highest priorities, right? And then work through together with the team again, what is our current reality around that priority? What is it that we hope to accomplish? How will we know we have accomplished it? And I'm just going to open up this also is make a copy. So it's yours to use once you have it. And underneath there, what do we have to provide more information? What do we need? What more information do we need? What are our resources in pursuit of this vision or this priority? And what are our barriers? Okay, so this is a sort of a next step. Okay. So that's pretty much the resources that I have to share with you. And do you have any questions or anything that you want to share about your process or how you think you might use some of this information?
So if we put together this leadership team,
Mhm.
how often would that leadership team change? Like, how often should you be changing parents or students? Would you do it like every year?
Well, it
Or,
depends. I think it would be wonderful if you had representation. It would be great. I think about like our school board, where we have a student representative and in my own district. And I would think that you would want to keep that fairly consistent, at least for a couple of years. I think the longevity, the institutional memory, right? And we were just, it's funny, we were just had a workshop on Tuesday where we were talking about effective teams. And one of the things that my colleagues said is that research has shown that teams work better when there is some longevity to the membership, right? Because what happens is they have institutional knowledge, they have their routines down. People tend to take on responsibilities that they assume that become easy for them. So I think to an extent, you want to keep the school-based people fairly solid. But I also would think at the same time that every couple of years, you might want to bring a new parent on or, students graduate. And I could see it being a privilege, that 11th and 12th grade students maybe, like maybe a student comes on in 11th grade and stays on through 12th, and then you rotate that.
okay.
Yeah. What else? In my fantasy, this is what would happen. You would be able to start on some of this, right? And then we would have all sorts of great things to talk about in our next session. I don't know if that's going to happen because that's a week away. But let me show you what sort of next steps would be. Because as this workshop session was conceptualized, I had sent out the prioritizing needs worksheet beforehand, and I had sent it out with a little email to get together with a couple of people from school and work through it. But clearly people are super busy and that couldn't quite happen. So we're not going to do that and so next Thursday on the 8th, we have our second session for this. And the next step that you would go through is after you conduct your needs assessment and you go through that initial template for working through, and then you identify some priorities with the one after that, We have a format that we developed when we were working with the schools in need of improvement in New Hampshire, and we've morphed it to simplify it. But this is a type of document that we have found is very effective for school improvement planning. And the thing that is effective about it is it holds people accountable and it demands that you set goals, you set measurable goals, evidence of completion. So what I'm going to just talk you through that here. This to leverage and barriers. So you will take your priority change goal that you articulated on that previous document and pop it up there and start to think about, and you will have had dialogue. So you probably come to this template knowing what you have to leverage and what some of your barriers might be. You're going to articulate your priority in terms of a measurable goal. So let's give you an example. Let's say you decide to focus on changing the culture and climate and sense of belonging. You realize, and I don't know what your actual priorities might be, but it might be, the kids in our school don't seem to feel a sense of belonging in our community, and our teacher morale is low, and relationships seem to not be so strong, and student-teacher relationships aren't that great. And maybe staff relationships are toxic. Maybe you found that out through your surveys, your focus groups. You would articulate a measurable goal here that you could you would need to do pre and post data so that you might see that only 40% of your students, according to your prior perception survey, feel a sense of belonging in the school. So you would set a goal of, 60% of our students will articulate feeling a sense of belonging in our school. 80% of our staff will report positive relationships with colleagues by June of 2025. And then that would be your goal here. And your measurement, I just said, you might use a survey to measure that. And what you're going to do here is you're going to itemize action steps that you're going to implement throughout the next school year and what it's going to look like as each of those steps are completed, when they're going to be completed, and who's responsible and what resources you might need. So it's really basic. It just really breaks it down for you, because sometimes what happens is that, first of all, you don't know how to begin to build toward improvement. You don't set measurable goals, or you don't attribute action steps to individuals that are responsible, or there are no timeframes. And this just helps keep accountability and keeps the work moving forward. So that's there for you. And that is something that we are going to focus on. So this is me. And I definitely think that you should contact me if you need anything for any of this. You will get the slides and the recording within the next 48 hours to share with your colleagues. All right. Well, thank you too. It was really nice and intimate. And
Perfect.
and thanks a lot. And I hope some of these tools are useful for you.